Welcome to a new edition of our program Africa Today. Minister of Foreign Affairs Badr Abdulati meets Senior Advisor on Arab and Middle Eastern and African Affairs Sou'ad in Cairo on Monday. They held talks earlier on Saturday on the sidelines of the Antalya Diplomacy Forum in Turkey. Both sides reviewed ways to strengthen bilateral cooperation and address regional challenges. The talks focus on enhancing strategic partnership between Egypt and the U.S., with both sides stressing the need to maintain coordination and consultation to support stability in the Middle East and Africa. The meeting also included an exchange of views on several key developments, particularly the situation in Sudan, Lebanon, Libya and the Horn of Africa. And moving on to Angola, where Pope Leo is in Angola, which is the third leg of his African tour. On the 8th day of the trip to the four African nations, Leo will fly to the Angolan town of Sorimo, which is 800 kilometers east of the capital, Luanda. More details.
Leo XIV has urged Angolans to move beyond decades of division as tens of thousands gathered for mass and prayers during his visit to the country. Speaking to large crowds near Luanda on Sunday, the Pope described Angola as a beautiful yet wounded country. He called on people to build a future free from hatred and violence after a long civil war that lasted from 1975 to 2002. Around 130,000 people attended events across the day. Many arrived before dawn to hear him speak. Later, the Pope traveled to the shrine of Maxima, the site once linked to the transatlantic slave trade. It is now one of Angola's most important religious centers. Leo is visiting Angola on the third leg of a four-nation African tour. In a speech to the country's political leaders on Saturday, he decried the exploitation of natural resources on the continent. He also urged political leaders to focus on helping all their people, not just corporate interests. He warned against despots and tyrants who promise wealth but leave people suffering. Angola is one of the leading oil-producing countries in sub-Saharan Africa. According to the World Bank, 30% of its population live on less than $2.15 per day.
And welcome back. Minister of Foreign Affairs Badr Abdulati meets Senior Advisor on the Arab and Middle Eastern and African Affairs Sou'ad. And to shed more light on the issue, we are very much delighted to be joined over the phone by our very dear guest, Ambassador Sou'ad Shalaby, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Ambassador Shalaby, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Ambassador Shalaby, the U.S.-Egyptian relation is often referred to as a fundamental pillar of the regional stability. Actually, after 4 decades, what is the most significant evolution we are seeing in this partnership between Egypt and the United States?
As you know, Egypt and the United States, and as you said, they have a strong strategic partnership for the past 4 decades or more even. But anyway, it is mainly based on regional stability, and having Egypt play the role all the time in crisis management and mediation, especially when it comes to the Palestinian issue and the rights of the Palestinian for homeland. And the minister, foreign minister of Egypt, met with while he was in Antalya. Of course, he met with the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and they coordinated closely the partnership between Egypt and the United States. All the aspects of the partnership are based on the mediation, the crisis management, regional security. We have also military cooperation that is always taking place between the CENTCOM and Egypt. There is always joint military exercises and there is U.S. military aid given to Egypt. So there is always diplomatic coordination between the two countries, and the relationship is focused on the Egyptian interests in the region and, of course, the U.S. interests.
Yes, of course.
And de-escalating the crisis that is happening, whether it is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or it is the Israeli war on Iran or on Lebanon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Ambassador Shalaby, Minister of Foreign Affairs Dr. Badr Abdel met recently with U.S. officials, which included, of course, Secretary of State Marco Rubio. What was the top-line message Egypt delivered regarding the current military escalations?
Well, of course, Egypt wanted to consolidate the ceasefire that is taking place between Iran and the United States, and also between Israel and Lebanon. So this was the focus of Egypt's negotiations and mediation. And of course, this is happening at a time when the crisis is going to return because of the timing of the ceasefire is going to end, and nobody knows if it will continue or not, because the United States is trying to threaten Iran, and because of the blockade of Hormuz, and the two countries are still in the process of mediation, but nobody knows if it is going to continue or not, because each country is threatening to blockade the Hormuz Straits, and this is going to affect the economy of the whole world, especially with the oil export of the Gulf countries to Europe and to China. So United States and Egypt are focusing on stabilizing the situation, and of course strengthening the ceasefire in order to not to affect the economies of the world, and the energy and the food security will not be interrupted in the Straits of Hormuz.
Yes. Ambassador Shalaby, beyond the traditional security, actually the talks between the two sides in Antalya touched on digital transformation and new investment sectors. How is the U.S. actually supporting Egypt's vision for a modern tech-driven economy?
Well, as you know, the United States has the top technological, yes, and the top technology in the world, and of course it is helping Egypt and helping other friendly countries in order to be able to reach the top also technology level in the Arab world. Of course, with this happening, with the wars happening and the instability in the region, the Egyptian economy is struggling, and there is, of course, economic resilience that the United States is helping Egypt, whether it is in the military, in the intelligence, in the military assistance, in the economic assistance. Of course, the peace negotiations and the stability of the regional crisis is going to affect the stability of the economy in Egypt, and of course the diplomatic negotiations are continuing in order to continue the U.S. support to Egypt and to the Arab countries in the region.
Yes, indeed. Ambassador Shalaby, Egypt has been a central mediator. How do you see actually the key parameters Egypt is currently insisting upon to achieve a permanent ceasefire?
Well, as you know that Egypt has not been alone. It has been together with Pakistan, with
Yes.
with Saudi Arabia, with Turkey. They are trying to reach outcomes from the Islamabad talks that took place 2 weeks ago. And now, if they continue the mediation, it is going to affect the whole region. So it is very important the role that Egypt is playing, whether it is in the negotiations or on the sidelines of Antalya Forum, which took place last week, and of course the fragile ceasefire status keeps everybody on their toes in order to see a lasting agreement. The failure of the talks will have the ceasefire in doubt, and there will be no future prospects for peace plan. Of course, the Islamabad peace talks were wanting to reach a final agreement to end the conflict, and they wanted a peace agreement between the conflicting parties. But we hope that continued diplomacy and the Egyptian role is very important to keep the talks going on and to keep the plans for the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, to stop this blockade, whether it is from Iran or from the United States, and of course to continue the mediation and to reach a deal that will that is agreeable to all the conflicting parties, whether it is nuclear program or maritime security, or lifting the blockade on the Strait of Hormuz in order to have economic stability, and of course. It is the role of the four big regional powers to push the United States and Israel to consolidate the ceasefire and to continue the mediation in Islamabad.
Indeed. Ambassador Shalaby, Egypt actually has been vocal about the Lebanese sovereignty, which is what are guaranteeing here can the U.S. administration provide regarding preventing further infringement on the Lebanese territories?
As you know, there was a failure in the Lebanese peace process last year, and this is why it is important that this ceasefire takes place. That is now consolidated last Thursday. That it should take place, especially that Lebanon has suffered a lot of fatalities, and also they lost their land a lot in the southern Lebanon. There was a lot of land that was occupied by Israel, and this, of course, is not correct, and it has to be made in a way that United States and Israel United States has to have power over Israel in order to stop the war, and also to have a ceasefire that will continue and will keep the Lebanese in sovereignty. The Lebanese government is in a status that they cannot control their borders. And this is something that, of course, only Turkey, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. This is the quadrilateral meeting that took place on the sidelines of the forum, and it is important to consolidate the Lebanese ceasefire and to have a framework where the disarming of Hezbollah and also there has to be a stop for the incursion of Israel into the southern Lebanon. So there has to be a stop. There has to be a peace agreement on that, on these conditions to facilitate the diplomatic efforts and to stop the war, the Israeli incursions in southern Lebanon, and to hold the ceasefire as much as possible so that no more fatalities, no more killing of innocent civilians in Lebanon.
Yes, indeed. Ambassador Shalaby, actually the U.S. recently is praising praised Egypt's role in facilitating a temporary humanitarian truce in Sudan. How is Cairo working with Washington in order to transit into a permanent cessation of hostilities there?
Sudan is one of the also very important negotiation between, it is one of the conflicts that Egypt and the United States are discussing whether it is to interfere. Of course, diplomatically, there has to be a way to stop the civil war in Sudan, because it is really it is actually forgotten after all what is happening in the region, in the Middle East, and it is important that the United States interferes and stops also the ammunitions, the arms and the ammunitions which are being transferred to Sudan illegally from the porous borders of whether it is from the Red Sea or from the internal borders with other countries, because they have a lot of borders with Chad and others and Libya, and of course these borders are very difficult to control. So there is agreement with Egypt to help in controlling the borders, and also to address the instability in Somalia and the Red Sea, so that at least Egypt's role is to preserve the regional territorial integrity.
Indeed, Ambassador Sou'ad Shalaby, former Assistant Foreign Minister, thank you so much for your precious input. Always a pleasure to have you with us, Ambassador Shalaby. And moving on, where an agreement was reached between the government of the DR Congo and M23 armed group to ease aid delivery and free prisoners in the coming 10 days. The agreement stipulates that both sides are to refrain from any attack, destruction or removal of objects indispensable to survival of the civilian population.
The DR Congo government and the M23 group agreed to ease humanitarian aid deliveries and release prisoners within 10 days, according to a joint statement Sunday following talks in Switzerland. Since 2021, the M23 has seized territory in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, a region ravaged by more than 30 years of conflict. The two sides signed a U.S.-brokered peace agreement in December, but fighting has continued. Talks mediated by Qatar were held in the Swiss Riviera town of Montreux from April 13 to 17. A statement issued by both sides said they agreed on the critical importance of ensuring life-saving humanitarian assistance for the people of Eastern DRC. They said the parties agreed to comply with all of their obligations under international humanitarian law, international human rights law, and international refugee law, as applicable. They signed a memorandum of understanding on ceasefire verification mechanisms to begin conducting surveillance monitoring, verification, and reporting on the implementation of the permanent ceasefire between the parties. The Montreux talks brought together representatives from the DRC government and from the M23 and its political arm, the Alliance Fleuve Congo. They were joined by representatives from Qatar, the United States, Switzerland, the African Union Commission, and Togo as the AU mediator.
And Togo presented its new geopolitical and security strategy for the Sahel during a high-level meeting in Lomé. The meeting brought together representatives from both the Economic Community, West African State, ECOWAS, and the Alliance of Saharan States, AES, as well as international envoys, including from France and the European Union.
In Lomé, a strategic roadmap for the period 2026-2028 was approved, marking a direction firmly rooted in the realities on the ground rather than ideological alignment. The 5 areas of cooperation for the Sahel defined go beyond mere declarations and form part of a process to stabilize relations with the Confederation of the AES. The approach is based on continued dialogue and a gradual process of building trust in a regional context still characterized by delicate balances. Lomé hosted the high-level meeting on Saturday. It is dedicated to the implementation of Togo's new Sahel strategy 2026-2028. It marked the transition into a new strategic phase following the 2021-2025 cycle. Discussions focused on adapting diplomatic, security and economic tools to a more complex environment while maintaining channels of dialogue between groupings with different trajectories. Togo's new strategy is not merely a policy document, but an olive branch and a formal framework for cooperation, as officials said. They said Togo stands ready to put its expertise in mediation and its regional roots at the service of stability, acting as a bridge between the Sahel and the wider world. The 5 main pillars structured the implementation: consolidation of political dialogue, coordinated response to terrorist threats, integration of populations, strengthening of economic cooperation, and investment in education as well as human capital.
Well, that will bring us to the end of this edition of our program Africa Today. Many thanks for watching.